And
Okie dokie.
so this lesson, we're going to draw a pear. I was talking about just doing objects like spheres and things like that, but with the boards and the pear, the pear is kind of spherical and the boards are cubic. So I'm emitting Eli now. And so then I will switch from here. I got this sweatshirt from Christmas with all these monarchs on it.
Oh, nice.
Friend Silka, she lives in Nebraska. I believe it's Nebraska. And so she sent it to me because she knows I like monarchs. So, okay, I'm going to turn the camera down. And I'm going to turn off the background image so that we can see. Go to go to none, and then I need this to be further down there, and there we are. The 55 Chevy in the background I drew. I can put it back in there just for a second just to mention it.
Hey Doug, I want to just interrupt and let you know one thing.
Okay.
It's snowing here.
Oh boy, it was.
Yeah. Is it really?
Yes, Eli, it is. So we're getting.
It's snowing where y'all are? It's not snowing where I am, I don't think.
How come there's snow in the background?
It is snowing where I am. There's some snow in the backyard.
I heard Texas was very cold. It was down to 35 in Houston, I believe. And so
in Houston, wow.
Yeah,
that's
so
cold in Houston.
So you have to get down to 32 to get snow. So something like
we don't get snow every year, but every 4 or 5 years maybe. But anyway, we've got it. It's snowing right now, and there are a few big fat flakes.
I never saw it snowing until I moved to New York. So on Thanksgiving Day, it was snowing. So any rate, that's fun. And so this 55 Chevy I drew with pen on paper, and then I scanned it and I colored it with Photoshop. But you really color it just almost like watercoloring because you have a brush and you can paint in the lines and color it. So if you wanted to ever learn Photoshop, I could teach you Photoshop also, but you'd have to get Photoshop, and that's another story. So these background image here is not drawn. I took a picture. I think that's Colorado and put it in there, and then I found some asphalt and put it in underneath. So I thought it turned out pretty well. That's Grandpa's 55 Chevy.
Yeah, it looks really nice, Doug.
It turned out nicely. So here I'm going to go here, and I will turn the screen off, none. And I have the pear, and I can actually go to my camera and zoom in a little more so that we can see it a little better when I'm on my camera. Zoom in a little more, zoomers, and then I can move this around. So what I did, I'm going to close this and you can be able to see, is I did the on the back with the pencil scribbling on it so I could transfer it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use a straight edge to do the straight lines just because I want them to be pretty straight. But I was at Hobby Lobby. And do they have Hobby Lobbies in Texas?
They do.
They do.
I bought this transfer paper, and you just put in between and you don't have to do all the scribbling. Here's a little corner because I haven't opened it yet. It was $15, but it's 24 feet long by 24 inches. And so you just take the little piece of transfer paper. Actually, you take a whole piece. And you can use it more than once, but you would set it down. And if you draw on it with the paper on top, you can draw your pear. This would be a very small pear. And then it transfers it. Now this is erasable, and they say it doesn't smudge, but it doesn't look like it smudges. So That's good. And so you can erase that and do everything. So it's a lot easier if you had that transfer paper instead of scribbling where it doesn't necessarily give you as good results as you would like. And so I bought it. I'm going to share half of it with Pam. So Pam goes, I want it. And there was only one roll. So
Oh.
I'll share it with you. So I asked her if she wanted it first, and she said, no, you take it. And then I said, I'll share. So I'm just going to take a second to outline these lines since I was at Pam's and didn't get to send this until this morning. And I'm just doing the straight lines. Now, don't worry about the wood grain, because we can do the wood grain, but as you remember, I say that you only have to do a little wood grain and the human eye fills it in. So you don't need to do that. So I'm drawing a little bit off the edge here, I think, where you can't see, but just outlining these shapes. Now, this little piece here that sticks down, I guess it's realistic because these boards have little notches where you can stick them together, but you wouldn't necessarily have to draw this if you thought it wasn't as important to the drawing. So you're the artist and you have what they call artistic license. So you can leave things out or add things if you think they're important. If you think one of the boards shouldn't be there, you could leave that out too. And you can decide about the composition. One thing that I do when I send you things is I spent about 40 minutes just looking at different pictures just to find a good composition, and then I cropped it a little bit. And the first one I sent you was a little small because I wanted the pear to be a little more pear size. So I sent you another one, but if you're doing the smaller one, that's fine. Because you can have a small pear drawing.
Yeah, we were able to print out the big guy.
Yeah, very good. I think that if you draw a pear, I think that it's a size that if you made it actual size, then people go, oh, I can take that and yummy, I can eat it. So, and so we don't need all the detail on this because as we're drawing, we can look at the detail. And that way I'm having you look more than just tracing where the highlights and shadows are. And then you can rely more on seeing, and then you can draw from that. I was almost tempted to just say, don't trace it at all. We just fake the drawing in. And if the pear's a little bigger or a little smaller or angled a little different, doesn't matter. A pear could be angled a little different. Now I take this down on this paper. Now I'm using a sketch pad that has a little more grain to it than the Bristol board, which is really smooth. I think for the bus bug, the smooth worked well, a more mechanical object. And I taped this down while I was doing it with this green tape, which releases very well, and I can stick it over here on the wall or whatever. And I just get some of the outlines here while I'm doing this. So I think I'm gonna leave it upside down for you guys. I'm starting with my 2H, and I have a whole set of different pencils. Okay. And I'm going to start with the pear. I'm going to take this green tape off and put it over there. You can reuse that green tape. And I think if I go here, and so it's a little hard to see the pear. I think I'll just outline it. Again, I kind of caution about outlining things because most things don't have outlines. They could have little highlights on them. And notice how I'm holding the pencil pretty far out. One teacher I had, his name was Miyazaki, and he did things that were so photorealistic. He did this whole thing with the razor blades on paper, and then he had one cutting the paper. It was a drawing, and it really looked like the razor blade was standing up and cutting the paper because the paper was split, and some photorealistic stuff he had in galleries. So he was very good. He was from San Diego State, and I believe he was Japanese. So I'm going to start right here at the bottom of the pear. There's a little dark area right there. It's just a little dimple where it's starting to go to the bottom of the pear, but it's also a color change. And I'm just lightly doing it in. Since my paper is a little rougher, it'll give me a different texture. I'm not shooting for it being really smooth. Now, pears are rounded. There's a highlight right in this area. Can you see that? Let me scoot this over. Right here, there's a highlight.
Yeah.
So we're going to leave that lighter, but it could be a light gray because it's kind of yellowish. So we can do the highlight as a light gray, but we're going to go darker around it. So if you wanted to draw the highlight, just remembering that that's supposed to be lighter. I'm just indicating it there. And it's because this shape is pretty much spherical. And if it's a sphere, so I'm drawing a sphere here, you'll get a highlight where the light hits, and it's pretty much round on a sphere. And then you'll have shadows in the back. And if you think of the moon, how the edge of the moon looks, the moon is a sphere. And so its shadows would be like that, and the highlight would be here on this sphere. And so the pear is really basically the same. It's a sphere here, which is elongated. It has the highlight here, but it has the shadows on the far side here, which are curved like the moon would be. And then they come up this way, because this ends up being more of a cylinder or a cone shape that has more of a linear shadow. So up here, where it's more cone shape, the shadow is more linear. Actually, it's more triangular. And then down here on the pear, it has a shadow down here too. Now I'm following the contours of the pear. So if I get lines, which I'm going to mean contours, if the pear bows out like it has a little pregnant tummy, then I can bow it out. And so I'm following the shape of the pear. So if you do see lines when I'm all done, they're really following the shape of the pear and mirroring those shapes that help define the shape of the pear. Did everyone get a chance to trace this yet?
Yes.
Okay, because
Yes.
I just really very simply just wanted this, the rectangular pieces of the pear. This is just a little neat way to display. They sell these boards and they have a couple pins where you can notch them together and make this triangular shape. You could probably make other shapes. I didn't look at it as much, but I thought it was kind of a neat way to display a pear. If you're going to have a dinner party and everybody could have a small one of these, and you could have a pear or an apple. So with this pear, since the other side is really a highlighted side, here where the pear has a lighter edge, it would still have some shading in here that curved around, especially when we're going darker. We can see that on the darker areas, but right in here, I'm leaving this edge of the pear pretty light. Now I have a line there, but once I darken the boards in, I won't have that line as much. And down at the bottom of the pear, I'm going a little darker at the bottom of the pear just to give it weight. The pear picture doesn't have as much shadow there. There's a little shadow on the board. But I'm just going a little darker because I found if you go darker at the very bottom, it makes the pear feel like it has some weight, and then it feels more realistic. So even though the picture doesn't have that darkness, I put a little darkness to fool the viewer into thinking the pear actually has some mass.
And this is still with the 2H pencil, right?
I'm doing 2H. I tend to do the 2H first on most areas, and then we go darker. And so
Okay.
this pear, there's none of this pear that's really a bright white. So everything on it is going to have a little shading. And you can go lightly on it. And if you think there's an area that maybe would do with a bright white, that just makes your pear a little shinier. This pear is, I would say, more of a satin finish. So it's not going to have any really bright whites, which would make it shinier. But if this pear had a water drop on it, you might want some bright whites to make it shiny. Now I'm going mostly just vertically on these lines, But once you get those lines in vertically, you can actually come back in horizontally, but curved to match the shape of the pear. So we're doing some cross action here. They would call it cross hatching, but I'm not really thinking about hatching. Now the bottom of the pear would go this way if you look at the way my pencil is going, because that's the way we're looking at it. But the top of the pear might go the other way if you look at the shape. And I'm just putting some lines in that way just to fill it in. And then when we get the darker colors in, we can start blending a little bit. Now, if you like this and you want to blend this 2H, you can blend it ahead of time if you want this to be a little smoother. Now notice when I did that, my stump was dirty and it made it darker. I'm okay with it, but you want to pay attention that if your stump is dirty, you might want to sharpen it or clean it. I don't know if you can rub it with an eraser. You might be able to rub it with an eraser or a kneaded eraser, the gummy eraser. So I'm going like that with the eraser just to clean it a little bit if you want it to stay real light. Or you can put this in a pencil sharpener. But I'm just blending it in because I want the pear to be fairly smooth, because I think it's more appetizing if it's smooth. And leaving some of those light areas where the highlight is and the edge of the pear. I like leaving a light edge on the pear or on things. It just makes it like, that's where your ambient light, which is background light, can hit the pear and give it a little highlight there. So I still with the very light colors there. I'm going to go with the 2H and look at where the shadows are underneath the pear. There's a shadow here that mimics the shape of the pear, pretty much rounded. And this one, I'm going to go the direction of that grain on the bottom board. It's interesting in shadows, sometimes you can see the grain more. We'll worry about the grain in a little while, but I'm going the direction of the grain. So even if I don't put any grain in, it could look a bit grainy. And this is, we're going to have to go to a darker pencil. And this shadow actually extends up on this other board, which changes angles because that board is a different angle and comes out over here, which it's very subtle. It's not a real hard shadow. When it gets closer to the pear, it's darker. But when it's further away, it kind of fades out. And the reason being is they lit this pear probably with 3-point lighting. And so we don't get really heavy shadows because we have a light coming to this side of the pear where the highlight is. We have a light coming to the other side, which is a little lower. And then you may even have a light coming from the back to highlight the edges. And so in photography, they like using 3-point lighting. And I'll blend that shadow in. And those shadows can go a little darker with a different pencil, but I just want to get a feel for where they are. And when I'm blending it, I'm matching the angle of this board here, which I'll call board number 2. 1 is the bottom, 2 here, and 3 behind the pear. And so you can blend the edges a little bit there. Again, a clean stump will be nicer. And those shadows help to define the way the pear looks. And notice the shadow comes right up to the edge, so we don't have to have a line around the pear. We just have a shadow up to the edge of the pear, and we can say, happy little shadow. I'm taking that from Bob Ross. I don't think he did happy shadows. He did happy trees and happy clouds. I don't think he ever did a happy shadow, so I'll claim happy shadow. There. Now, we've got those. I don't see any shadows anywhere else necessarily, except for the edges of the board. If you see this board number 2, it has a shadow all along that edge. So if I make that edge, scoot over so you can see, you're okay. this edge right here. Now, I'm going to outline this with the triangle. And if you don't have a triangle, you can just use the edge of a book or the edge of, take out a credit card and then buy some art supplies for Uncle Doug. No, take out a credit card and use it to draw with. One thing about drawing fruit is you can always get reference if you go to the grocery store with a mask. Crystal, you probably haven't gone to a grocery store in 2 years.
Yeah, I haven't gone to a grocery store probably since before I was in the hospital with the lung.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while. And I
It's been a
still
while.
don't like them. I looked at Vaughn's. I go to a food bank and I got a gift card for $25 for Vaughn's. They give them out every once in a while. And so I went Vaughn's, and well, Vaughn's opens at 5 in the morning. I'm going, 5 in the morning, then there'll be nobody there.
Right.
Mistake. I went at 5 in the morning, and the people who were doing all the produce and all the meat, there were like 20 people that worked at Vaughn's.
That were there.
And they were doing their job, and they didn't care if you're in the way. Some of them said, "Oh, excuse me," but they had to get to where they were going, and they didn't want to give you 6 feet distance. And I'm going, this is worse.
Oh, interesting.
So it was funny. So maybe I need to go at 6:30 in the morning when they're done with their jobs, and then nobody else is there. So when I did this shadow on this board number 2, I did it the direction of the grain, because on this grain here, the grain goes this way. Now, if you ever worked with wood, the direction of the grain makes a big difference, because that's the way the grain is strongest. This one has the grain on this board going this way, and that's the way the board is strongest. But this way here, if you tried to bend the board this way and break it, that's where it's a little less strong. And so if you want to do karate and break boards, you get a board that has good grain, but you want to really like a nice pine that breaks easily, and you hit it and it breaks with the grain. One thing that they do with karate is the holder, if they give the board a little bit of pressure by bending it, then they bend it like that. When you hit it, then it breaks a little easier because it's pre-stressed. So there are little secrets to breaking boards. I don't know about concrete blocks. I never did them. So I just darkened that a little bit with the direction of the grain. And I'm coming across and just darkening it in a little bit. So I just decided to look at the shadows. And I like going balanced when I'm going across. So if I did one here, over here, there's a shadow across the bottom of this board number 1 right here. And this little one underneath is in the shadow. There's a shadow all around the bottom, which we could do. But I don't think I'm going to worry about that one right now, because when I do that, I end up smearing it. So the bottom one, I'll just wait. And I'm just going to draw this board in. Again, we don't want the lines necessarily, but I'm doing it just so we can have a reference here. And then we'll darken it in. And so I turn my triangle so I have the hypotenuse, so I have a long enough thing going there. And then here, these can come here. On this edge, and let me scoot it over so you can see a little better. So I did these little corners here. And so this one's going to be a little darker, but just for now, I'm going to come in and just draw all the boards just so you can see the edges. I'm just doing it lightly, but I don't think you can see mine. And if I overshoot, I can erase. There's a neat series on called Last Man. It's about Apollo 11 going to the moon. First man. So first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, and it goes through the whole Apollo and Gemini series. Really very interesting. I found it gave a little bit different face on Neil Armstrong. You know, we thought of him as this brave first man on the earth, but it kind of shows his family life and how the little turmoil's there, and even just communicating with his sons that he might not come back.
Mm.
So it's interesting. It was also interesting, like the head of the program was with the priest, and they were writing up a prayer in case they didn't come back.
Mm.
So they were all prepared for that.
Wow.
So a little more dangerous than we would think. So we got these different boards here, the angles, and you know, I don't think there's any other shadow except for this one here. And this one's shadow that would go with the grain this way as I'm drawing. Let's get it there. And you're really better off keeping things light. And then once we get most of this 2H done, we can go, you know, to a 4B and darken things in and gradually do it. Because you can erase, but it's much nicer not to have to. The more you overwork the paper by erasing and drawing again and erasing again, gives you some, just, it roughens up the paper and then it's not quite as nice. This little corner here underneath this board, it's really very light in the picture. I'm darkening it because I want it to look like a shadow, and it also gives more weight to the board above. And these will start popping once we get darker colors. I think I'm going to do the shadow underneath this that comes around.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes over here, and then it changes direction. And the edges are a little rounded because of the lighting here. And then I'm just going to bring that in. Now this one, yeah, I'm going to do little swirlies with my pencil because they don't have a grain direction. I'm just going to do little loops and fill it in just to make it feel a little more organic. It doesn't have any wood grain. It could have a texture like, you know, asphalt or something underneath here too. I think it's just on a table. But a lot of times tables have a little texture to them. And I'm just darkening that in lightly, and that can go darker when we get to the 4B, and it would go darker where it's closer to the boards. And I'll use a stump and blend that in just a bit. That's snowing. That's fun.
Yeah, it still is. It's starting to act along the fence line
to stick.
Oh, very good. Yeah, because it snowed a couple times in San Diego, and then it just was gone in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It just melted away. So we'll blend this. I'm blending the shadow underneath to make it nice and smooth. I don't think I'm going to blend the wood shadows on the wood because I want a little bit of texture to make it look more wood-like. And just soften the edges with my stump. It's funny, if you have a stump in the garden, you don't like it. Got in it. You're drawing, you like it. All right, so I'm going to still stay with the 2H. I'm going to sharpen it. I always like to sharpen it. And again, I'm turning the pencil every once in a while, so it tends to sharpen itself. Every once in a while, I turn it like 1/8 of a turn. I'm not sure that's why they have the facets on the pencil, but that's what I use them for. I turn them one facet at a time. So in the shadow of this pear, how's everybody doing? Need more time? Hanging in?
Just 1 second.
All right,
I
no,
don't need more than that.
I'm going to drink some Dr. Pepper. Okay.
What? Do you know what this is?
It's a holder, and you can put your pencil in it if your pencil gets really, really short.
Ah.
Pencils get very, very short, but you still want to use them because you don't want to buy new pencils. Now, if you really want to have that use the Miyazaki and get really far away, you can. On my TV, it's muted, but it's the movie The Martian, and it was a very good movie. Mark Wahlberg, and he's stranded on Mars. And so how they deal with that is kind of interesting. So yeah, pencil holder. I don't have one. When my pencils get short, I'm just gonna cry. That's all right. I'll have to get a pencil holder. You can always tape them to another pencil if you have to. But still needing more time?
No, I think we're good. I'm good at least.
Okay. What I'm gonna do is with the wood boards, you can see there's grain, but nobody's gonna know if you're not making the grain exactly the same. I do like the knot holes here.
Yeah.
They're kind of fun. And it might be even more fun to maybe add another knot hole to balance them out over here and do that. But what I'm going to do is draw these lines. And I'm just going to make it a little wider. I'm doing it mostly in the dark area, the shadow. And then where it comes out, I'm just going to indicate it just a little bit, just by doing like a broken line. Because I have a feeling that in the shadow, you can see it a little better. So it doesn't even matter, but the lines, just as long as you're going the right direction, you can give them a little bit of spacing. And then I'm just making the lines on the board itself, which will have a shading to it, just indicating them broken in a rather random way. You can even wiggle these lines if you want, but in the shadow, I'm making them darker. And I'm just doing a few because if you do a few, then your eye tends to fill them in. And so you don't even have to draw the wood on all of the board. It might be nice to have some grain up here. And I'm just doing it really lightly with the pencil so it actually skips. And I think that looks more like wood grain than if I put a specific line in. And if you think about doing things in odd numbers, the human eye and brain like odd numbers. So if you go to the store and they tell you to get eggs, milk, bread, and an apple, you might forget one. But if you do it in pairs of 3, eggs, milk, bread, apple, banana, oranges, then you're going to remember it a little easier. And these lines don't have to go all the way across. In fact, here where maybe there would be a little bit of a shadow, just making them come partially across, and the human eye will fill that in. Now, if you really were a perfectionist, I saw a drawing the other day. This woman drew her, she was a graphic artist, one of my ex-students, and she drew her hair with all the lines and all the details and all the highlights, and it was just absolutely gorgeous, but probably took years and years, so I like it better when I just skip and do a little bit. Now this whole board is actually a little bit, is it snowing hard now?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, it's coming down much more now.
Can you hear
Oh
snow?
my God.
Can you hear snow when
It is.
It's quiet. You can hear it if you're outside.
Okay, and Eli, is it's snowing there really hard?
Yeah, it's snowing. It is like snowing where I am.
Awesome, Eli. It is here too. It's coming down.
You know what? The sun is coming down very strong here. It's nice living here, but it's so expensive. So I'll just say that in case anyone's listening, don't come here. It's too expensive, but it's,
Oh,
yeah.
it's really coming down now.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly expensive, certain things here too, Doug, interestingly.
Yeah.
You think it was going to be, a lot less, but then there were certain items that were more.
Well, if they have to ship them, it's probably a long distance to ship them from certain places.
Yeah.
Because you're not really near a seaport either, are you?
Well, Houston's like 2.5, 3 hours away.
No, that's
Yeah,
not
it's coming
too bad.
down now and it's sticking on the roofs of the houses and stuff.
You would think oil prices are probably better in Texas.
Yeah, that is. But property taxes,
Yeah.
much higher. But part of that's because we don't have income tax in Texas.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we really noticed it with our medical insurance because when I was with, LAUSD and Tom and stuff, coming here, that's probably the most expensive piece that's different in Texas than in California.
yeah.
Benefits are better in California than here in Texas. But anyway, no biggie.
Yeah. I put this knot hole in over here because I just found it interesting. And you don't have to make it exactly the same as the knot hole, but the roundness. And if you really look, there's kind of some lines that make it look like an eye. A little
And
bit.
shadow under, or maybe that's just the
I
dark
can't
green of
see
the
the knot
wood.
hole.
Shadow here at this edge.
No, hey Doug, can you move the page so we can see what you're doing with the knot hole? Other way. There you go.
Okay.
A little bit more.
Oops.
There you go. Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. Thank
I
you.
was thinking thanks for mentioning that, Eli. There's dark under the knot hole, and I was thinking it was shadow, but maybe it's just the color of the wood.
It's the color of the wood, but you can indicate it if you want. I'm just
Yeah.
doing a few lines and I'm following the shape of the knot hole. You'll notice that the lines do that, but I'm actually overemphasizing it because I like the knot hole. So, and then these lines go straight down. And we could put a light shade on that whole board because that one board is actually fairly dark. So once you put some of those wood grain lines in, and I like doing them in 3s or 5s or 7s because the eye seems to like that. And I'm trying to balance it out. So if, oops, I made a mark there, but that's fine. That'll be erased later. Bim, 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 bim. Good. And so again, having a brush, they have artist brush, but you could get a cheap big brush that you paint like at Home Depot to brush these eraser things around, just a throwaway brush. And it's better than rubbing it with your hands because my hands get dirty. And so I'm just putting, I have some wood grain here, I have some wood grain here, here, balancing it out. I'm even going to do some wood grain down below where in the shadow I'm making it a little darker, but then it comes out. And I'm just letting it skip. I'm just letting my pencil skip because I think it looks more like wood grain if it skips a little. That's just my feeling, but if you don't want it to skip, you could probably draw the wood grain without skipping. And so I have wood grain here, here, there, and some there, and maybe a little bit over here, in here. And if you think you're doing it too regular, put another line in between and break it up. So we don't want these all to be 1/8 inch spacing. Wood grain is irregular. This is interesting wood grain here. I think they used to call that C-cut, but I don't know why. So I have to think about it. Center cut, maybe it's C-cut. But so a few of those wood grains. And again, you don't have to fill in all the wood grains. This board here is darker where it meets the pear, but the whole board is darker. But I'm just going to darken in. I'm still using my 2H, but we'll come in soon with the darker color to fill things in. I avoid the darker pencils because they smear a little more. And remember, I used a piece of paper to keep from smearing at times. But in this case, I'm going to come in the edge of this pear, and I'm just darkening in this board. And I'm going around the edge of the pear. And you could go the direction of the board, but the reason I'm doing it with this board, well, in the picture it's darker, but also I want this edge of the pear to be darker, because where things are darker, they tend to stick forward. The light comes forward and the dark goes back. And so it's giving this pear a little more depth if I darken in this edge. Now it starts to look like a shadow, but I'm going to bring this darkness over and do most of the board. You could even do the whole board if you wanted to, because this board is tending to be a little darker. And I'm going opposite the wood grain here, but you could go the direction of the wood grain. And if you did that loosely, it would start looking like wood grain without even thinking about doing wood grain. That's what happened right here. It actually looked like wood grain without me doing wood grain. And then I'm trying to get the edge of that pear very defined and crisp, because nobody wants a mushy pear. I put pear in turnovers. I had these crescent rolls, and I needed to use them. They were going to expire, and I opened them up, made little pockets, and put pear and stevia, which is a sugar substitute, cinnamon, vanilla, just a touch of butter, and what else did I put in there? Cinnamon, vanilla, and I put some pumpkin spice in there with the pear, and I baked them. Oh, they were good. I baked them with the Superman pie.
Oh, okay.
Once I get my 3D printer fixed, I'm going to make cookie cutters to do the Superman logo, so I can do that.
Ooh.
So probably copyrighted. Now, notice when I did this pear, I darkened this side.
Yeah.
If I'm not selling them, I'm okay. But the other side needs to be darkened too, because that should continue over to the other side to help define the pear, and leaving just a little light edge on that board just to help it seem like it's real. And so we could play a little more with that and work the other boards. But I think for now that looks pretty good. I think I'm going to darken this edge right here where board number 3 meets board number 1. 1 was the bottom, 2 was the left, and 3 was the right. And so right here, just that, even though there's not really a shadow there because of the lighting, I'm doing it to help define where the edge of that board is. And when you darken it, it brings the number 1 board forward and the number 3 board goes back. And even underneath the number 1 board where the number 3 board is, I'm going to darken that in. Trying to think about the grain when I do it. So this is coming along really nicely. And I'm going to go to a 4B, and I want to start. Now, when you look at this composition, what's the focal point? What's the main place you look?
The pear.
The pear. All the lines of these boards are pointing you towards the pear. I guess they could be pointing you away from the pear, but really they're pointing you towards the pear. So the pear is the main thing that we need to do. When you're drawing people, you really need to get their eyes and their mouth correct, because that's what we look at, eyes mostly. And the stuff on the edges, the peripheral, if I'm saying that right, can be muddled. Because when you focus on something, that's where you see things. And even in filmmaking, they will have a depth of field. I was watching Ocean's 11, and who is it? I think it's Mark Wahlberg, but maybe it's not. Is talking to Clooney, And when Clooney talks, they focus on him. And then when Wahlberg talks, I'm moving my hands. Wahlberg talks, they focus on him. When Clooney talks, they focus on him. It's actually the way our eyes work, but they work so seamlessly we don't notice. If you look over there at the TV, look over there at the TV, it's all in focus, but everything else is blurry. But then if I look here at my drawing pad, it's in focus, but things on the edges are blurry. And so that's how it works. So in this case, if we did the detail on the pear, and I'm darkening the shadows in, I might lose some of my grain, so I'll put it back in. But I'm doing mostly just on the bottom of the pear to make that really make the pear pop out.
Doug, I read an article recently on wildlife photography,
Yeah.
and it's reminding me about what you were just saying, because the gentleman said, who was writing the article, said focus on the eyes. You want the eyes to be in focus. If the tail of the animal's out of focus, no big deal, but your eyes need to be in, the eyes need to be in focus.
And they tend to, with wildlife photography, use more of a focus that's short in depth, so that the stuff in the background, the mountains and the trees are out of focus and the bird is in focus, because the background stuff's not important. And with photography, they have a portrait mode, but if you go to like f5.6, then your focus is shorter, and then you're not worrying about the background. But if you went to the Grand Canyon, you'd want everything in focus, the canyon near you, the canyon far away. You'd want to go to f22, which everything is in focus. But you don't want that with a person. So this pear, I darkened underneath. The stem is dark, but a stem is a cylinder, so it's going to have a shadow on one side. If you think about it, or you look at it, there's a little bit of a highlight on this side, on the same side of the highlight of the pear. There's just a little bit, you can hardly see it, but if we overemphasize that, will be better. So I'm darkening the left side of the stem, leaving a little white there. I might change that, but leaving the right side white, the white side right, so that it gives that stem a roundness. So those shadows and light define the shapes of things. And so we can come in and do that. Now the pear has darkness at the bottom. And with this 4H, I can darken the bottom of the pear a little bit. And I'm doing it very lightly, and darken the left side of the pear, which is the upside in your drawing. And you can follow, I'm going horizontally across the pear, and I'm doing curves because the pear is curved in that way. And you could actually leave that texture if you wanted to, because then it makes it look more sketchy or more artistic. If you wanted to leave those sketchy lines, then it helps define the pear also. But if you decide, I don't like it, there's too many lines there, I thought it was going to look good, I'm going to blend it on the bottom, maybe just leave a few lines. Take this light area, which I left, and make it just a little darker, but I like leaving it light. And so I blended the bottom and left the little sketchy lines at the top, and that's fine. And my stump is getting wet because it's next to my cold Dr. Pepper. So Dr. Pepper is not a sponsor of this program, but if they want to be, I would be glad. There we go. And so I just went in with this darker pencil and just crisped up the edges and darkened the places I thought the shadows would be, maybe even over here. And I'm doing it in a way where you're following the shape of the pear, and that's when I say contour. And so if you see the lines, you go, oh, that's the shape of a pear. And coming over here. Now, we don't have any of the spots on this pear. You could probably do this 4H and just add a few spots. And the spots are like your wood grain. They could even be open spots that make them look like they're white, because some of the spots are white. If you just draw a ring like that, notice how my pear, it looks like it's white in the center. Maybe I can bring it. And it's not. It's a darker gray. It's a medium gray, but when I do a circle, it makes it look like it's white inside. It's just the contrast between the dark of the pencil. And so you can put some circle spots and some just regular spots. And again, you don't have to do this everywhere on the pear, but just doing it in a few spots, and that makes your eye fill them in. And I'm going to just do them lightly on this side and do some circle spots. And it makes it look like it's white, and it's not. The way the contrast works, now at the top of this, it actually has this little tan area that these Bartletts have. I think this is a Bartlett. Goes like that. And so I'm just tanning it in there. There's a little dark spot here in the middle, but I don't like it. So I'm leaving it off. And you can certainly blend where you want. Going dark underneath the pear, even on the bottom of the pear, even though it's not as dark in the picture, I'm darkening it up because I want that pear to look like it's sitting and not floating. And doing that darkness underneath makes it sit. You know, really, this looks pretty good. We could stop, but you know, defining a little more of the wood grain, going in and defining the shadows. I think this shadow underneath the board, if I go in, and I'm going to take my triangle. Where did I put my triangle? I had a triangle, no. One thing's interesting about drawing pads like this, the front of the board, when you open up the pad, the front texture on the paper is better than the back texture. So if you ever tear a piece out and you turn it over, the texture's not as good because they're assuming you're going to draw on the front of the paper. So they finish it a little better in most cases.
Interesting.
So yeah, if you have a sketch pad, always draw on the front side because it seems to be a better texture. So I'm going to darken the shadow underneath the board, and I wanted to use my triangle, but my triangle has run away. Run away. So I'm going to go and use this piece of paper and put it right there. Triangle would be a little better. Where did my triangle go? I don't know. It probably dropped. So I'm just going to go like this and use that paper to keep me from drawing on the wood.
Ah.
And I'm just darkening it a little bit. I'm not darkening it a lot. But when it's closer to the wood, it should be a little darker. You could even, if you had to, cut the paper to a certain shape if you wanted to be very specific. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to use my stump and blend it. I just wanted it to be a little darker right in there. We've got about 4 minutes left, and you can certainly continue to draw. Again, I find it sometimes difficult to decide when it's done. So you should look at it every once in a while. One thing that we do that we should probably get away from is you should look at this from further away. You should probably look at this from about 5 feet away and say, oh, I think that's done. So
Shall we share our
Yeah, I think we should
pictures?
share our pictures.
All right, here's mine.
Oh, I like your pear. I like the fact you left a lot of white, and your knothole is great, and your stem is really good.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I like that pear, and it's a lot less work than mine. You left a lot of whiter areas, and
I don't know if that was intentional or just how it
no,
went.
it's how it turned out, but it looks very nice, and you don't have to make things look photorealistic, and you can make them look. People look at that and say that's a pear, and it looks yummy. So,
Thank you. Holly, share yours.
Okay.
oh, very nice. Also, I love your spots. You have them in the shadow areas, and that's very nice. Your knothole's very good, and the shadow's good. And you notice you left your bottom board pretty white, and it looks great. So you don't have to match any. That's if you took that and you did prints and you sold it on Etsy, you could mail them out in the. You get those envelopes from the postal that are the set price, and just mail them out. And you'd have to get some good photographic paper to print on your printer, or you could sell the original. But if you sell the original, then you don't have it anymore.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Eli, will you share yours?
What, mine? Oh,
I'm still working on it.
No, I said
But
Eli.
yes,
but-
well, we'd love to see just a little peek. A little peek. Just half a pear.
Oh, nice,
Oh.
Eli.
I need to zoom in on yours. Let me go here. I think that's really nice. It's a subtler touch. You're still with the 2H, aren't you?
no, I started using the 4B, but I was going really light with it.
Light is a good choice because then you don't have to erase. And so I really like the way the shape of the light is on the right side of the pear, where it's that kind of triangular shape, which is rounded. It really makes this look spherical.
Yeah,
Very
it
nice.
does.
Very
Good
nice.
job.
So we all have slightly different styles, but they're all very nice. And so practicing is going to do this. And you can always continue with the drawing. But I think if you get to a point where you look at it and say, that looks nice, it's a good time to just stop.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find, I don't know if I showed you my bus. There's my bus when it's done.
That looks
Oh,
awesome.
Dad. Very
Oh, wow,
nice.
yeah.
I love your tires. Your
Yeah,
tires are so
Turned out all right. I posted it on Facebook, and a guy said, "Well, can I send it to my daughter because she loves buses?" I said, "Well, if you send me $50, I'll give you the original." So,
Yeah.
what Wyland did, and we're pretty much done with the lesson today. But do you know Wyland, the guy who draws those big whale murals?
No.
Well, there's a guy named Wyland, and he does these big murals of whales, and he gets paid to do them. And normally you see them at SeaWorld, or we had one in San Diego. So coastal cities probably more like them than if you were in Wichita, Kansas. You probably wouldn't have a whale on a wall. But he paints them all by hand. But what he does is he does prints of them and paint smaller paintings and postcards, and he makes a lot of money selling all that stuff. And if he does a big painting on canvas, he does all this collateral, posters, greeting cards, mugs, T-shirts, and then the original. If someone wants the original, then the original is, $30,000.
Right.
Because everybody has the T-shirt, and I go, well, I want the original. And so maybe you want to keep the original and just make prints. If you get good photographic paper, the printers now do good job. The one I like is, you have Costco's in Texas.
Yep. Yes.
I don't know why I think Texas is speak a
No,
different
there
language.
are
a
some
different place.
things that Texas doesn't have.
Yeah.
We have hardly any variety, Doug, when it comes to grocery stores.
Oh,
There's
interesting.
just HEB.
It'd
But
be nice to have that monopoly, wouldn't it?
yeah. And then the thing that Texas has a ton of is different banks. There's all kinds of different private small banks. So,
Credit
you know,
union.
Credit
it's-
union. So, the one thing I thought was interesting was there is I went to the pet store and they had ferrets, and I thought they were so cute. They had like 5 ferrets and they're all laying in a bunch, all twisted around each other, and then
Yeah.
the ferret would jump around and look around and grab some water and go back and jump into the pile, and all the other ferrets would squirm around. And yeah, they're very destructive. They don't like them here in California.
Hmm.
They'll eat crops, but some people have ferrets even though they're illegal here. But I thought they were very
Ferrets are illegal in California?
California, yeah.
I didn't know that.
I had a friend who had a ferret, but you know, she had to kind of keep it under wraps. But it was very nice. It would hang out in the hood of her hoodie, and the ferret liked to be in the hood as she walked around. So there's one other thing they don't like here is some pet stores are starting to sell what were they called? They were a type of, I think it was a centipede or something. And it was very large, but it ate lettuce and stuff like that. I think it was a centipede, but it was bisexual, so it would reproduce without anybody.
Yeah.
And so they just would go and go. And if they got loose, they would really hurt the crops. And it was from Vietnam or something like that. So they banned those too. So we're all done for the day. I appreciate drawing with you. I hope my silver point comes next time so I can demo that. But you can spend a little extra time with this. If you check out Etsy, you can take a picture of this and you can post it. And then if you wanted to sell prints or sell the original, you could. And it seems like Etsy is a good place to do that. I'm going to have to start doing that. So. I used to go to Society 6, but I found that Society 6 kind of had their favorites, which they pushed to the front. And then if you weren't one of their favorites, your stuff wouldn't be shown as much. So I don't know how to didn't know how to become a favorite.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, thank you for the lesson so much.
All right, no problem. Thank you. And
We're going to keep watching the snow coming down.
well, good for you. Stay safe. It's probably hard to drive in the snow.
Yeah, we're not, we
Yeah.
won't be driving, right?
No.
Yeah. All righty, Doug.
Do
Take
they,
care.
All right.
do they salt the roads out there?
Well,
No, because it happens so infrequently, I think.
Okay, and plus the salt destroys your car. In New York, they always have a beater car for the salt. All right, I'm gonna go. Bye-bye, everybody.
bye, Doug. Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye, Eli.